All of us know the hymn, Amazing Grace. And many of us know something about how it was written. But I've been reading some interesting books. One is called Amazing Grace, the Story of America's Most Beloved Song. Goes in great detail, as you can tell by all my little markers.
Wow.
And another book called Amazing Grace, which has the story of a lot of different hymns. And that's fun to read too. So these have inspired me. I've always loved singing and music. And so I thought I'd put this together and share it with you this morning. Think about 2 Corinthians 9 through 8. And God, 9 through 8? 9, 8. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, you will abound in every good work. So, the song Amazing Grace has an amazing history. And it is interesting, it's complicated. The author of this book is a man named Steve Turner. He's a musicologist and a biographer who has written much about different musicians, performers, and he decided to take on John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace in 1772, if you can believe it. And the foreword of this little book is by Judy Collins. Now, all of you were around listening to a lot of music in the 60s and 70s. And you may recall that in the 60s, it was a tough time. The war was going on in Vietnam. There was a lot about racial things going on. And Judy Collins wrote the foreword to this book because this song is so meaningful to her. And what she said in her foreword is that as a child, her grandmother loved the song Amazing Grace and sang it often. And so when Judy Collins became well known as a kind of a folk singer, beautiful, clear voice, how many of you remember Judy Collins, of course? And, excuse me, she became really famous. She was doing very well. And apparently she also was having a lot of difficulties personally. And she was in a group, remember when they used to sit around in circles and kind of talk about their problems, and they were encouraged to open up with our friends or a group of maybe people you didn't know. She was there one night, and there was a lot of confrontation and people were unsettled. And she said, let's just stop a minute and let's sing Amazing Grace. So this group of just friends and people sang it. And afterward, her manager was there. It might have been her producer, but either her manager or her producer said, Judy, you need to record that. It's beautiful and you need to record that. Well, up till then, there were no religious songs that had really been made into pop songs, so to speak. So she said, okay. Well, they decided to do it in a cathedral. I don't remember if it even named where the church was, but the acoustics were incredible. They recorded it, and it was put out to the public, and it was an instant hit and so unusual to be a hymn. So so this began to take it into the pop culture, and a bagpipe band in Scotland said, this would be, the leader of it said, this would be a great tune to play with our bagpipes. So the next thing you knew, there were recordings of bagpipers playing it. And then it began to really get into our culture. Sorry. John Newton is the man who wrote the lyrics for it. In the days of 1772, think about that. They weren't even printing hymnals. They would use poems, and whoever was the music leader in the church would pick a tune and people would sing along. But they didn't write down the music as such. But John Newton, and you need to know more about him, which is part of the story that I'm sure many of you already heard, that he was a slave trader in the 1770s. He started as a young child. His mother sang to him all the time, and she taught him languages. But as a very young boy, his father was a captain, a ship captain, but just doing all sorts of things, not the slaves at that time. So, but in those days, when a ship took out from London or from other ports in England, they'd be gone maybe 3 years, 3 to 5 years sometimes. They wouldn't be home with their families. So John Newton was born, he was a little boy. When he was only about 11 years old, he went on a ship with his father, and he became a sailor too. Well, his father was the captain of the ship, but he moved to someone else's ship. And John Newton was he was a ne'er-do-well, not ne'er-do-well, but he was rambunctious. He loved to make up songs that demeaned the captain of the ship. Now, this wasn't his father, but he was on several different ships. He finally ended up on a ship that was trading slaves. And in 1790, wait a minute, sorry. They went to Africa, and he was on the slave ship, and they were also, the slave ships were smaller and more poorly built, and they were very, as you've seen pictures and heard all about that. But he was religious because his mother had instilled in him religious basics, and he believed in the Bible, and he believed in God, and he believed in Christ. But he was very unsettled and unpredictable. So he was on the ships, and one day there was a terrible, terrible danger of shipwreck. And he was, let's see, I need to move that up so that you can see the lyrics. Because when you look at the lyrics, you can sense what he was feeling with all the different lyrics. So he wasn't writing them down, but he was taking in his mind what he was enduring. And at one point, he was put onto an island. It was it was on the West Coast, and he spent a year there. He actually lived among the Native Americans. As most of us know, tribes of Africans, not Americans, sorry, Africans. African tribes were bringing other tribal people and selling them. And so he was there for a year, and he actually developed a love for these people. And he even is believed, according to his notes, because he wrote a lot of diaries about what he had been doing. And he actually had an informal wife during that year that he was on the island. And his mind, he just really became even more engrossed in the horrors of this. And when he got off that last boat that he had been on, he decided he was going to go into the ministry. And he settled in Olney, England, a small town in England, and then he began to write his diaries, and a lot of those are still intact, and research has been made with those. But the fears that he went through, were terrible, and he became an anti, let's see, what's the word? He became against slavery, totally, and he, excuse me, his love of singing, he and another man began to write lots of songs, and they would put them in the lyrics. You have only a book with lyrics, no notes, no tunes. So he wrote this down, and it became such a popular tune. Not tune, but the words themselves became so amazingly popular. He gave a sermon. Excuse me, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I thought I'd made these notes big enough I wouldn't have to use my glasses. They actually put a lot of their lyrics. Thank you. Thank you very much. They put them into a booklet called Alney Hymns. And this was one of the ones that they included. And then if you think about, it's asking for the lyrics. Oh, all right, so how did they come about with the music with it? Yes.
Linda, your earpiece fell off.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, we don't want to miss what you're saying.
All right. It's on the floor?
No.
Oh, here it is.
I'm dangling.
All right. Here we go. Oh, is that better? Okay, how much you want me to do over again? No. Good, thank you. All right. The tune we know today was evolved. Different ministers would just most churches had someone who led the leading, and whatever tune that person picked, people would sing along. So eventually, it began to become more firm that this is, and a lot of research was done to try to figure out what inspired this such well-known tune. And they discovered a song called New Britain. And it's fun. I got on the internet and listened to a lot of these things. I thought about playing Judy Collins' version of it, but I thought, no, I'd rather hear you all sing it. So in a few minutes, we'll do that. Am I supposed to go clear till 10? But all right, so the music wasn't set until much, much later. But how did this hymn get to the United States or to the colonies? Think about it. This is 1772 that it was written, and in those days it was being sung in England, the Anglican Church. But eventually there were missionaries coming to the East Coast of what would be the United States. We all know about the Wesley brothers, Charles Wesley, who wrote many, many hymns himself, and John Wesley, who was he was an Anglican minister. He never left the Anglican Church, but he was his method of teaching and believing inspired the Methodist Church to come out of the Anglican Church later. But these people were coming, and they were bringing from England the songs that they loved. And one of them was Amazing Grace. And when you think about the lyrics, now let's see, what lyrics are you seeing? Well, we know the lyrics so well, and let's see, I'll move it down a little bit. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come, 'tis grace has brought me safe. He was saved from a shipwreck. He was saved from living for a year in Africa, and he knew then how wrong it was to take these slaves back to the continent of America. Imagine, a lot of people think it's a gospel music, that it's actually a Negro gospel song, but it wasn't. But think about the meaning of these words, how much they would mean to someone who was a slave. So it caught on, and and the tune we know today, as I said, evolved from one called New Britain. And the growth of popularity was remarkable when after Judy Collins made it popular, and then all sorts of people were singing it. It became, many of the popular gospel singers were singing it too, and it became in films and celebrities. Its live performances were made even at Woodstock. Woodstock, it was Ray Charles sang it. Elvis even sang it, not at Woodstock, but he sang it. I don't think Elvis did. But the Amazing Grace has continued to be enormously popular. What would John Newton think today if he could come back to this century and see what has come along with how popular? Apparently, it's the most used poem, or hymn. It's the most used hymn in at funerals. And it's interesting because it really is not about death. It's really about life and amazing and the grace of God. So hearing it sung on the streets of corners of London, folk clubs in New York. It was sung at the Berlin, at the gates, at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. It's been sung on the mountainsides of Kenya, at secret churches in China. They sing it. His phrases from mouths of rock singers to protesters in Christian of all denominations. It's seen by many as a Negro spiritual, and rightly so. They've adopted it. The deliverance from sufferings and this world are in fact the words of a former slave trader giving thanks for his redemption. He felt redeemed. Whoops, hello. I'm too animated, that's the problem. Okay. Oh, now it's up in my eyes.
Did he go blind before he wrote the song or after?
After. And so you know some about him.
I saw the movie.
Oh, I didn't realize there was a movie.
Amazing Grace.
Tell us about the movie.
Well, it's more
Tina.
the story about how the English, abolished slavery over about a 40-year period where our people were still talking about it, getting ready to fight the Civil War.
I'm just going to hold it.
Amazing Grace.
Yes. Was it for television or was it in the theaters?
It was released.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it in the movie theater.
Uh-huh. Oh. How many others saw it in the theater? Not many. Uh-huh. But some of you did. So, any other comment? Tell me, I'd like to hear from some of you. In what way?
Linda, I was just going to say, two thoughts occurred to me when you were giving these really excellent examples. One movie, Tender Mercies. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, Tender Mercies.
That was the song that he sang to his daughter, got killed in a wreck.
Yes.
And it was background. It was when the crazy guy went into the black church South Carolina and murdered 9 people. Barack Obama sang it, and everyone stood up and sang along. So you're right.
Yes. And who else can name places where you've heard it sung in unlikely places?
I can't say to that, but I can tell you who made it famous. It was Mahalia Jackson.
Yes, Mahalia Jackson recorded it. Many other African Americans have recorded it too. So it is part of our culture now. Yes.
Question, Mr. Newton. For some reason, I don't know anything to speak at all, but I had gotten the impression he was deeply involved in the slave trade himself and was sort of an active proponent of it for a long
Yes.
time. And then kind
Yes.
of had a moment of revelation where he felt like what he was doing was really bad.
Yes, absolutely. He did have his own ship at one point where he was the captain of the ship. And that's referred to in these books, that he did become, because it was very profitable. And also he was trying to save money to go back to marry his longtime girlfriend, you might say, or expected to marry. And her name was Mary. But when he began to realize, I don't know exactly the moment when he knew that this was terribly wrong. As he came back and he went into the ministry himself, had his own church, and he began to speak against slavery, and he became a very strong advocate for abolitionist during his latter years. And so I'd like for us to, it's gonna be kind of short, I don't know, I don't know how to stretch it anymore. Yes.
Question before- Maybe this is apocryphal, but somewhere I heard or learned that, again, this point when John, sees the light and he wants to say no to slavery, he was in the ocean, and there was some spot in the ocean where it hit him, and he had this big revelation.
Well,
So I don't know if
I
that's
think probably,
true or not.
no, he never was thrown into the ocean.
No,
He
no,
was,
I'm sorry, no, but it was something about just a certain.
the sea was terrible. Yeah, there was very threatened. He was in a ship that actually was threatened to be wrecked. And that's when it really, some of this grace he felt so strongly, because he really expected to die at that point. And so he felt like that was when grace came in to save him. Yes.
So this is sort of lighthearted, but I would sing this to my youngest child, when she was like 2 or 3, and so she'd say, "Mommy, sing Amazing Grace."
Oh, did you hear that? Her little daughter would say, "Sing Amazing Gravy." Amazing Gravy?
We get to the part about saving grace like me, and she's only 2, and a beautiful child, and I'm singing like me.
Oh, that's those other stories about Amazing Grace? Yes.
One of my parishioners, she's a teenager, she had a t-shirt on one time, and she had the words, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wreck." And I thought, yes, that's much better than that.
Oh,
So I always have that in my mind.
yes, yes.
During the pandemic, my older daughter sent me an email that had, these pop-up courses that come in the malls and that? This one was a pop-up during the pandemic. And they had, it must have been 36 little compartments of women singing Amazing Grace. And they were singing individually, but evidently their pitch was so good that when they put them together, it was beautiful.
Oh, well, my son is active in an Episcopal church in Los Angeles, and he plays the piano and has a little group that plays music there sometimes. And he was playing the carillon. That's the bells that you have a keyboard and it plays. He played that after church, and he would often play Amazing Grace during this time. And yes, there have been all sorts of Amazing Grace. That name has been used in different things. Okay, there's Amazing Grace Bakery in Minnesota. There's an Amazing Grace Barbecue in Kansas City. Amazing Grace Whole Foods in Louisville, Kentucky. There have been many novels that have to do with, well, in fact, Harriet Beecher Stowe had Uncle Tom humming Amazing Grace. And there are a number of videos that you can see online. One in particular is, you might want to look at, is Berlin Tattoo. And also you can hear Judy Collins on if you just Google it. It's on YouTube, but you don't see her. They didn't film her performance in the cathedral, but that recording is there, and it's really powerful. But yes, it's been a popular term. It's been, as you said, in movies, in books. It really has become a very strong part of our culture. Did you think of something else? Good. Yes.
Canvas shop name at that.
John, I've lost it again. Okay. Janet?
I said there's probably a cannabis shop named that.
Oh. Is there, or are you suggesting it? Are you going into business, Janet? Yes.
There's Frank here to give us.
Frank?
I'm being harassed here. Significant to me, it's the second most favorite song in the state of West Virginia.
That's interesting. How do you know that?
That's where I was born and raised.
Oh, well, you should know.
Mountaineer.
You should. Yes, the Mountaineers really took to it.
Now, here's, the question needs to come now. Okay, Frank, if that's the second, what is the most favorite? The most favorite song in the state of West Virginia? Mountain Road.
But that's not a hymn.
Hey, it's a mountain.
Mountain Road, send me home. Okay. Well, okay, I have added, I want us all, I'm going to have you sing it, and we'll just sing it a cappella, and when we finish, I'm going to add a new verse. For instance, the one about if we'd been there 10,000 years, that wasn't in the original group, and nobody seems to know when that was added on, at least it wasn't in my documentary. But I thought we'd sing it and just a cappella, and maybe I should get this fixed again.
You have to go back to the first verse for everybody.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. It's kind of, let's see, I need to turn this so I can see it. Are you all ready? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace. was a song so sweetly sung, till loss and pain broke in. But grace was there to give me strength and find God's love again. Thank you.
Any questions on that?
Oh, any last questions? Any questions? The one thing I noticed is these lyrics are not exactly the same that are in our book. And this was out of one of these two books, and Betsy I took a picture of it, and she put it on. So there were one or two verses. I know. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that too. I hadn't noticed it before. All right, any other comments or, yes?
You know, it'd be fun if somehow we could all go watch the movie together somewhere.
It would, wouldn't it? Maybe we can find it. Does anybody have,
You can do that out at your parents' on First Street, you know, you can arrange for a private group to go in there.
where?
Where do you all go? 71st and 169?
Oh, the Cinemark?
Oh, that'd be fun.
Wow. Well, we'll talk to, yep. Would someone like to follow through on that for me? Buzz, would you look into that for us?
Absolutely.
Who would like to look into that for us? Now the children are getting raucous. Well, thank you. Yes, wait, another comment.
Did Mr. Newton ever come to the United States?
Not that I'm aware of.
He remained in-
I don't believe he did. No. Any other comments or knowledge or any experience? This last little verse that I made up reflects the time after my son died in a car accident when he was 15, and that was 1979. And that this had become very, very popular, and we sang it at that time. So I thought that was, I wanted to put a verse in myself.
Could that be put in the chat?
Pardon me?
Could that be put out in the chat? That verse you made?
Yes, yes, I'm sure that Betsy would be happy to if you'd like it.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, Janet?
Different topic, but what's the name of the song that the author, his family was going across the ocean and his poor daughters and wife drowned and he wrote the song? What is that?
Oh, my soul.
Yeah.
What is it?
All is well with my soul.
Oh, all is well with my soul. Yes. That's lovely. Any other comments? Well, thank you.
Thank you.